With an ongoing pandemic that disproportionately affects my community and an ensuing social movement to address white supremacy, there's a lot going on for Black people in the US right now. And when I'm not thinking of ways that I can contribute to fixing some of this, I like to watch Studio Ghibli movies for solace. One of the most recent films I had the chance to watch was Princess Mononoke, one of their most famous and influential works. Now, when I was watching the movie, I couldn't help but think of my exploration of abolition. Now, you may have come across this concept yourself, especially if you've seen any footage or, been to a protest yourself and seen protesters talk about things like abolishing prisons, abolishing the police. And one of the biggest obstacles to abolition is carceral logic, a phenomenon that is present throughout this film and throughout this country. So let's get our terminology together real quick. You've probably heard calls to abolish the police and prisons being raised in the current social movement. These calls derive from an intellectual tradition known as abolition, which decenters punishment as a means to address social problems. Instead, abolitionists work to build safe and healthy communities that no longer need prisons, cruelty, or vengeance to maintain. Abolition calls us to question the efficacy of punishment as a means to deal with problems and encourages us to imagine a world where underlying social problems are addressed, instead of scapegoated by harm doers. Many of you watching right now may see abolition as unrealistic. I still struggle with fully grasping the ideals of the movement myself at times. This is due to a punitive mindset or carceral logic that pretty much all of us have been socialized in, especially in the US. Carceral logic refers to our predisposition to use punishment as a primary tool in addressing societal problems. The movie opens up with Ashitaka doing battle with a cursed boar. Now, he's initially warned not to touch the boar because it doesn't look right, and the villagers are hip to it. So, of course, he's going to end up touching the boar anyways because he's a hero, and also if he didn't do something, a lot of people were going to get hurt. So he manages to defeat the boar, but it comes at a huge cost. His body is left scarred, it's not looking good at all. And so he goes to the wise woman of his village for advice. And there he gets some really, really bad news. Now, this is actually going to be our first instance of carceral logic being used in the movie. The wise woman tells Ashitaka that he is going to be banished from his village forever because he is cursed. And this curse is going to end up turning him into a demon and killing him awfully, and they decide that it's for the best interest of the village that he is discarded, essentially. From his journey to remove his curse, Ashitaka comes in contact with our next major player, Lady Eboshi. Now, this woman is complex. It's very clear in this world that patriarchy and misogyny are very much present. It's not that type of fantasy world. And so she's definitely been going through it, but she did not let that stop her at all, and she's able to carve out a place for herself in the form of Iron City. Now, Iron City is a place of refuge for anyone that's been discarded from society, especially sex workers and leopards. Now, it's very clear that trauma from the world that she lives in has shaped her worldview. Lady Eboshi has been traumatized by men, and it's alluded to by the gods themselves, the animals. And so she has a no-nonsense, very, very carceral way of dealing with this, which is eliminating her opponents. She's caught in the movie making statements like she doesn't trust any men and that she is going to kill all of the gods so that things could be peaceful for her and she's able to be in control. And so her brand of carceral thinking is very much a problem for our next major player. Abandoned by her parents and raised by wolves, San is no stranger to the worst sides of humans. And her worldview is only further solidified by battling against humans her entire life alongside the wolves. We see very early on that San has a very deep connection and devotion to her wolf comrades as we see her nursing one of them back to health after they've been wounded by Lady Eboshi. So San has decided that humans are the major problem in causing disruption and turmoil in the forest, and that their existence threatens the balance of everything. So her conclusion is that she resolves to kill Lady Eboshi and all of the humans who she feels are solely responsible for all of the destruction that's happening. This is Sand's version of carceral logic. One thing you'll notice about carceral logic is that it's not really rooted in malicious intent. Though it usually leads to malicious treatment of oneself or others, it's usually for the benefit, or at least what people think is going to be the benefit of the entire community. Now, how helpful is carceral logic actually? This video is being recorded as two major players in the crafting and enforcement of the 1994 crime bill are being considered for the highest offices in the country. This policy is pretty much recognized as a failure as it wreaked havoc on Black communities across the United States. By allowing for mass incarceration and over-policing of Black neighborhoods, there is a great deal of suffering that Black people in this country have experienced for the decades following this piece of legislation. Now, it's pretty clear now that the 1994 crime bill is pretty anti-Black, but that was definitely not the case back in the day. Let's go back to the early 90s. Black neighborhoods were flooded with drugs, which was orchestrated by the government. In an effort to control profit from these drugs, gangs warred with each other, causing many people in these neighborhoods to be hurt or killed in the conflicts. Not to mention hard drugs were being peddled, leaving many highly addicted. The community was in turmoil and a lot of people were fed up. So how do we address this problem? With punishment, of course, carceral logic. And so, drug dealers were identified as especially evil actors that had to be curbed through tough sanctions. A lot of Black people, specifically Black politicians and quote unquote Black leaders, actually helped sponsor and craft the thinking in what came to be known as the 1994 crime bill, the bill that wreaked havoc in our community. We see a similar occurrence in the film. The curse that ends up infecting Ashitaka personifies the compounded harm that comes from carceral logic. Fueled by hatred, the curse causes people to lose their sanity until they become demons. No one is immune to the curse, whether it be human or God. From the film, we learned that punishment is not the most effective way to address and heal harm. Ultimately, we find that both Eboshi and Sand were wrong. In their efforts to punish who they perceived to be wrongdoers, they ended up causing harm to themselves and to the forest. Like Sand, many young Black radicals have a reason to be angry with the people who chose to support the 1994 crime bill, especially people in their own community. However, no one is immune to the blight of carceral logic. Sand was right about a lot of her preconceptions about humans. They were causing a lot of harms to the forest. And Eboshi specifically, she was doing a lot with trying to kill the forest spirit and everything else she was trying to accomplish. However, merely disposing of people who engage in quote unquote criminal behavior or who do harm only further perpetuates carceral thinking. And this carceral thinking ends up harming everybody. And Sand actually learns this lesson, specifically through her relationship with Ashitaka. She's able to see that her idea that all humans are evil is immediately disproven by getting to know him better. Furthermore, she sees that gods too can be corrupted by the curse that actually infects Ashitaka when she witnesses Okoto being transformed into a demon because he's so fanatically obsessed with killing all of the humans. The main issue with carceral logic is that it does not work. Instead of focusing on trying to punish someone that you think is responsible for all of the evil in the world, it is often more advantageous to try to rectify the situation and address where needs are not being met in different communities. In the climax of the movie, Eboshi succeeds in killing the forest spirit and calamity ensues. All living things in the forest, whether it be God or human, is at risk of being destroyed. To resolve this situation, they have to make peace with the corrupted forest spirits by returning its head. When this is done, the world is restored and the inhabitants of the forest are given another opportunity to try to exist in community with each other in a much more peaceful way. In the end, they are all connected to each other. So this is clearly just a movie, And trying to address communal harm is usually far more complex and nuanced than we see portrayed here in the film. However, what this movie does do is give us a vehicle to imagine alternatives to punishment when it comes to addressing our issues with each other. That's one of the things I really love about fantasy, is that it gives us a way to imagine a world that's not bogged down with the limits of our current understanding and system. Thanks for staying with me to the end. If you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Now, I really want to know what you guys are thinking. Do you have another read of the movie? Do you have critiques of what I just said? I would really love to see all of it. And so in the comments below, please feel free to share your thoughts. And also, if you have any like reading materials, scholarship, all that type of stuff, I would love to read that too. Yeah, thank you so much. I think I'm gonna go now.